Hi, Joel. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me here for the interview.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get started. So I know that you got an email talking a little bit about what our interview process is like, but I thought it would be good to go over it in person and give you a chance to ask any questions that you might have.
That sounds good. I'm feeling a bit nervous. I feel like I haven't busted out my whiteboarding skills in a little while, but I think I got this.
Yeah. Interviews are pretty stressful, and I know that whiteboarding interviews especially can be nerve-wracking because they're a little confrontational and the questions are often not what you might do every day as a developer. But here at Thoughtbot, we've put a lot of work into thinking about how we can make our interview more collaborative and closer to work that you would actually be doing.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to do here, we're going to walk through a scenario, and I'll ask you a few questions. It's really an opportunity for us to discuss the questions and how you might approach them. They're a mixture of technical questions as well as consulting questions.
Okay. I'm kind of curious. You mentioned consulting questions. I work at a product company. I've never consulted. Can you give me a heads up, like what those are going to be like?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess by consulting questions, I mean questions about like product scope, team interactions, process, things that are really important for a developer's day-to-day job, but aren't necessarily like technical implementation.
Okay, so like agile stuff?
That's definitely a big part of it. But there's also going to be stuff that goes just beyond just process.
Okay.
Yeah, sound good?
Let's do it.
All right. So for this first question, we're going to imagine that you're a developer at Thoughtbot and you're rolling on to a new project. Your client is a gym that's in the area and they have an existing code base that they're looking to expand upon. They want to build out a system that allows users to schedule sessions online. Currently, all of their gym goers are calling into the gym to schedule a class, which is not ideal. So to get us started, how would you begin onboarding and getting to know an existing code base?
I think I would probably look in the models directory first. We're assuming this is a Rails app, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think probably look at if they have a user model. There's often a lot of logic in there. Mm-hmm. So I'd probably take a look at that and then try to find so-called God object of the system. There's often a lot of the business logic is centralized there. And I can also sort of see where are some of maybe the pain points in the app, where things get a little bit more coupled. That should give me a good idea.
Nice. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like the strategy of like finding the God object and then fanning out from there. I feel like that works really well. Are there other techniques that you might use?
Yeah, I think I might look at the routes file, sort of see are things sort of RESTful or, wait, no, let me take that back. The first thing I would do is run the test suite. I feel like that's the first thing I should say on a Thoughtbot interview. So testing, I would run the test suite.
Yeah, we do like tests a little bit at Thoughtbot. I hope you don't feel like I was like fishing for a particular response. I really just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about all of the different ways that you might onboard onto a project. Let's imagine that you've gotten to know the code base, you feel really confident, and the client is itching to get started. They are looking to Thoughtbot for a little bit of help defining what an MVP might look like. So I'll tell you a little bit about the requirements that they've given us, and we can talk through what the process of scoping an MVP might be like. they're building a website. They want users to be able to book appointments through the website without having to call in. They're planning on opening a new location sometime next year. So they imagine that their new location will have a different schedule. And they also run promotional events throughout the year. So the next promotional event that they've talked to us about is sometime at the end of June, and they're going to run extended hours. But sometimes they do promotional events where they do like shortened hours. They're also closed on major holidays. So given all of that, what to you feels like should be the MVP of this product?
I think when scoping an MVP, it's important to sort of find what is the core problem that we're solving. And I think here it's self-service. So if a client is able to self-serve at the gym, then whatever minimum piece of software that we've built is successful, is doing the job that we're wanting it to do. In that spirit, I think, particularly given that the new gym's only opening next year, I think you said, then we could probably cut that functionality and say that we don't need support for multiple locations when we launch V1.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think that reasoning is solid. Do you feel like being able to handle, like being closed for the holidays is core to the app?
That's tough. I feel like it adds a lot of complexity to the logic, and I'd rather not have to do it. But at the same time, it's really hard to go to market without that. If, say, you mentioned we'd be closed on the 4th of July, if a client were to book an appointment for the 4th of July, then show up to the gym and it's closed, that costs us a lot in terms of goodwill and probably costs us in like actual dollars as well. It's just a bad experience all around.
Yeah, I agree. Having a client like book a session and then go in and the gym is closed is probably a really bad user experience. Is there anything that you could see changing about maybe the requirements that would make you more comfortable cutting scheduling from scope?
Was that the wrong answer? Was I supposed to say yes?
No. I just think that talking about like scheduling is an interesting area, and it might be interesting to talk about like ways that this could change in order for you to feel more comfortable cutting it from the MVP.
Okay. I wonder, how often does this project release? And I ask because at my current company, we are on a 2-week sprint cycle, and we release once at the end of every sprint. So sometimes it can take maybe 2 sprints for something to go from idea to production. And given that July 4th is pretty close, I feel not as comfortable not having that built into the initial release.
That makes sense. Taking like a month to ship something when you're trying to get out an MVP really quickly would be very stressful. So it doesn't mention it in the initial prompts, but at Thoughtbot, we usually run 1 or 2 week sprints, and it depends on the project and what makes sense for the team. So in this situation, maybe it would make more sense to have shorter sprints and go with the 1 week sprint. Okay.
Out of curiosity, have you ever worked on a project that used a continuous deployment approach?
Yes. And I think that's a really good idea to bring up here. I do continuous deployment on my current project.
Nice.
For really similar reasons, where the client is trying to ship a new set of features, and we deployed something initially that we wanted to build up really quickly. So that's another thing that I think would work really well on this project.
Okay. I think if we had these sort of tighter iterations, I'd be more comfortable with a tighter MVP. Those two things tend to sort of go together in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. I think that approach makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad that you brought up like these techniques kind of around delivery that are also important for MVPs.
One alternative that we might be able to do is, and this is something that we did at my current company when we first launched, was maybe going live with a beta version. So what we really want to test and get feedback from our users is, does self-service work? And then what are the things we need to learn from that? Holidays are just sort of like a special case that's going to sort of take time that we need to gather feedback. So if we were to maybe ship a version that doesn't have holidays in it, but only sort of as a beta to selected users, and we made sure to communicate with them. Look, this is beta software. It allows you to book anytime, even on holidays, and then maybe send out an email reminder a week before saying, hey, the app will allow you to book on July 4th, just a reminder that we are closed that day.
Yeah.
That would allow us to then get that user feedback and get the iteration loops much tighter, while at the same time not having the pressure of shipping to people on July 4th and not having holiday support.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I also like that because, when you're putting out an MVP, like there might be some like user experience issues, there might be some small bugs, and I feel like having this beta version sets expectations for users of like, this is slowly going to get better, and it's normal that there are a few rough patches. Nice. I feel like with that, we've really like nicely talked over what an MVP would look like, and we can maybe start thinking about how we would implement that.
That sounds good.
All right. So just to reiterate about where we landed, we want to initially build out a flow that allows a user to go online, book an appointment, and we're not going to worry about any sort of flexible scheduling. We can say the gym just has like 9 to 5 hours, and we also won't worry about multiple locations. So given all of that, how would you go about modeling these different objects and how they're related to each other?
I think it would have some kind of trainer object, and then a schedules table, and then probably sitting between the two, maybe like a slots model or something that could be sort of belong to both a trainer and a schedule. I guess we'd have to probably like pre-generate those ahead of time. Actually, can I take that back? I can see where this is going, and I actually did this on another project, and it didn't turn out too well.
Oh.
This was a payroll application I was building, and we leaned very heavily into active record associations for all of our modeling. And sort of core to that was the concept of a pay period and everything associated to a pay period, which meant that I had to pre-generate them a couple every month. And then all of a sudden, we hit the daylight savings boundary, and things got weird.
Oh, no.
And so all of a sudden, we have hours that are associated to the wrong pay period, or maybe get just orphaned or not associated to a pay period at all, or even try to get associated to a pay period that should exist but doesn't, and then we just get an exception. So we've got a lot of problems with our payroll reports.
I can see how users might be.
Not something you want on a payroll system. And this was the bug that wouldn't die. Like every few months, we'd run into another variation of this and be like, oh, the pay periods strike again. So
you need to do that.
No, I'm going to stay away from pre-generating these things.
Okay.
I'm sort of trying to visualize this in my head. And I'm thinking sort of, if we have a calendar, I probably don't want to model the white space on the calendar, but rather the individual events on it. So what if instead of having that table that sits between the trainers and the schedule, what if instead that represented maybe appointments? So these are slots that have already been taken. And then when we want to show what is available for other people to take, we can just sort of calculate that sort of at runtime, if you will, based off of what we know has already been booked and what the current schedule is.
Okay. So just to go over to make sure that I understand your solution, you would have like a schedule table with the hours that's associated with a number of appointments. Trainers would also have many appointments.
That's right.
Yeah.
So an appointment would be for a particular trainer at a given time.
Yeah, I think that really nicely covers what our MVP would look like. Cool. So if we start to layer in some of the features that we had talked about initially, let's imagine we've built out the MVP, the client loves it, and comes back to us and says, now would be a great time to make the system handle special events. So that could look like extended hours for a promotion. It could look like being closed on a holiday like July 4th. How would you add that modeling into our current solution?
Yeah, I think I'm glad we decided to put this off earlier because this is kind of the gnarly part.
Yeah.
So previously we had the schedules table that just had a single row in it, which, I don't know, feels a little bit weird to me. I think now we could add maybe a starts at and ends at column to it.
Okay.
So now we'd have a lot of rows in this. And a particular schedule would be just active during a particular period. One thing that might be nice with this is it allows you to sort of set up schedules ahead of time. So you can say we had like a winter schedule and a summer schedule. The admin could go and set this early in the beginning of the year and say, okay, these are our hours during the winter, and then starting summer hours, these are going to be different, and they don't have to like change them now to make them live now.
Yeah, I feel like that really nicely covers a common use case for gyms that maybe wasn't like talked about in the initial requirements, where you're scheduling things for like large blocks of time. Could we talk through how an admin would go in and like for July 4th, how would they go in and close the gym?
Yeah, so I sort of think of like a holiday being like a micro version of like this winter and summer schedule thing. So I guess an admin would go to the admin panel. We already have a summer schedule set that goes from the first day of summer, June 21st, to the end of summer on September 21st. They would then have to end that schedule early on July 3rd, create a new schedule that's only for July 4th, where the gym is closed, and then start again another schedule July 5th through September 21st. That's, I guess you have to copy over, it'd have to be the same as the summer schedule.
Okay. I feel like that might be a little error prone for admins that have to like recreate this old schedule.
It is a little clunky. Maybe I could add like a cloning button to like say, okay, clone the other half. Like we know we want the halves to be the same.
Yeah.
That's still kind of heavy though, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of feels like we're doing a lot of work to make our models or to support the way that we've modeled out the scheduling, and our models maybe aren't like working for us. I liked what you said before, where you said that we're handling these schedules for like different parts of the year, and then I think you used the term like micro like unit of time when you talked about holidays. So it seems like there is maybe like some logical separation there that we're not accounting for.
So you're saying that maybe like a schedule and a holiday are sort of similar but not quite the same kind of thing?
Yeah, to me they feel different.
That's intriguing. Okay, so I'm going back to sort of visualization mode, and I think previously I was seeing like a calendar with just a big event that covers the whole summer, and then when I want to add an event in the middle, I just break it into two and put a new one in the middle. But maybe I should be thinking of it instead having one big event that covers the summer, and then kind of just overlaying a holiday on top of that.
Yeah, I think that fits closer to what we're trying to go for.
Okay, so what if I model it this way? I could have a table that represents holidays, that's its own separate table, and then keep the schedules the way we've already described them.
Okay.
So then when we're looking up, say, what are the availabilities on July 4th, we first look at the holidays table and say, are there any effectively overrides? Are there any holidays today? If yes, then that's the schedule that applies that day, because it's really just a special case. And then if we're on, say, July 3rd, then there are no holidays, therefore we fall back to what is the current active holiday, or current active schedule, rather.
Yeah, I think that to me feels like a more elegant solution, especially if we think of like maybe the UI that would naturally fall out of that, of like having holidays be distinguished from like schedules that administrators might enter into the system. And I think with that, we kind of only have one feature left from our initial prompt, which is being able to support multiple locations. So if you were going to modify our existing database table diagram,
Yeah.
you add multiple locations.
I guess the obvious thing is to add a locations table. There are now multiple gems.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably want an association to schedules because schedules are now per location. I imagine they don't all share the same schedule. And actually, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I think I would probably have wanted a validation on the schedules table to say that there can only be one active schedule at a time.
Yeah.
And then now I would want to have that be a little bit more fine-tuned where it's one active schedule per location. So it has to be scoped to a location.
Yeah.
And that would be something I would have to make sure I add some testing around because that seems like an easy place to introduce a bug.
Yeah.
I'd want to make sure that was very well tested. Maybe in association to the holidays as well. I don't know if we do different holidays at different gyms. That seems a little bit weird, but maybe the special promotions would be different.
Yeah, I could see that if they wanted to make target slightly different groups of people for the different gyms, and so they would have different promotions. I think that makes sense. Yeah, I feel like that solution came really elegantly out of our more flexible scheduling solution. So.
You're right. I think that's kind of all there is to add is just the locations table.
Yeah.
And
nice.
so for me, that's kind of validation that we made the right choice in the previous question. Our architecture is now very expandable.
Yeah, that's great. I think with that, I've gone through all of the questions that I had for you. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I'm curious, what are the next steps for me after this?
That's a good question. So usually there are 2 more steps after this. The first being a code review. So you'll get a link to a GitHub project that'll have an open PR on it. The project is based off of one of Thoughtbot's internal projects, and you're asked to leave any feedback, any questions, try and review it the way that you would just like a normal pull request. And then after that, we have a pairing interview. So you'll come in, we try and do them on Fridays. Thoughtbot has internal time where we work on investment projects. So you'll pair with someone in the morning and then have lunch with the team, and in the afternoon you'll pair with someone else.
Okay. Does that mean I might end up pairing on FactoryBot?
Yeah. A lot of our Friday projects, or a lot of our open source projects, are born out of things that we started on Friday, things that we wanted, and we had some time and space to create them. So it's a very real possibility.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I could commit in on FactoryBot. I am curious. You mentioned earlier there's a pull request review phase, and I feel like I've not seen that on interviews before. Anything I should watch out for? Are there eight hidden bugs I need to find or something like that?
Just like a checklist of things to make sure that you comment on. No. So similar to this interview where we want it to be discussion-based and we're just looking for how you might approach these kind of problems. On the code review, we're also looking to see just what kind of things you look for, like how you communicate your feedback. Code reviews are a really important part of being a developer. So we're just curious about how you might go about performing a pull request or performing a code review.
I like that you have the emphasis on sort of team collaboration and how that works.
Yeah,
That's
we
important
think
to me.
Yeah, it's a really important thing at Thoughtbot too. Do you have any other questions before?
Yeah, could you maybe just sort of walk me through what a week in the life of a average Thoughtbot developer is like?
Yeah, I can walk you through a week in the life of Rachel. It's very exciting. So from Monday to Thursday, I work on client work. What that means for me right now is that I'll pair in the morning with another Thoughtbot developer, and then after lunch, I'll continue whatever we were pairing on just by myself. Around 3 o'clock, we take a coffee walk, which usually for me doesn't involve coffee. It's just an excuse to go outside, get some fresh air. I find that when I take some time not looking at my computer, everything kind of sorts itself out. And so when I get back to it, all of my problems seem like they're fixed. And then on Fridays, I've been working on my RailsConf talk, which...
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very excited about it.
What's the topic?
We're talking about our interview process. We're hoping to... We put a lot of work into, like I was saying, make it more collaborative, make it closer to work that you might actually be doing. And we're hoping that it's useful to other people.
I have to say, this has been one of the more fun interviews I've done, so I'm glad you're going to get a chance to sort of share that with the wider world.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to hear that feedback.
Good luck.
Cool. All right, so I think with that, we're all set.
All right. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming in. Awesome. All right, now that Joel is gone, it's probably a good time to fill out our interview rubric while the interview is still really fresh in my mind. I'm a big fan of this rubric. I find that it helps me put different parts of the interview into perspective. So let's get started. Okay, so all these questions are asking me to kind of identify what level I think Joel might be at, so expert, practitioner, apprentice. So for this first question, was a candidate able to talk through different strategies for integrating onto a new project? I think Joel had a lot of really great techniques for maybe getting to know a code base. He didn't really talk through like enhancements that he might be trying to make, like fixing any bugs in like the onboarding docs or fixing any test warnings. But I also didn't prompt him again for that after he finished talking about how he would get to know a code base. So I think for this question, he's probably a practitioner. All right, was the candidate able to define a product, and were they able to justify and validate their decisions? I really like how Joel answered this question. I liked that he not only talked through features that he would keep and why, but he also talked about how the way that we deploy to production affects what might fit into an MVP, which is, I think, really important and not something that all candidates mention. So I think he's definitely an expert here. So the next question is, was Joel able to model complex objects in a domain? So this is a little interesting. I think he really quickly came to a good solution for our MVP. I really liked that he had two approaches and that he used his real-world experience to kind of define which way he would go. And he was able to also come to a good solution for the scheduling component. Initially, his solution was a little clunky, but I think when we talked it over, he got to something that was really nice. For this, I'm gonna say that he's a practitioner again. That feels right. All right, and for the last question, was the candidate able to talk through the pros and cons of their technical solution? I think that Joel did really well here as well, because he, when I asked him to talk through how an admin would enter a holiday, he was really able to quickly identify what the disadvantages to his solution are, even if he had like a little bit of difficulty coming up with a more elegant solution. So I think that Joel is an expert here as well. So I think overall, Joel did really great on this interview, and that probably we should try and hire him, or at least bring him in for a code review. I think I'm gonna give him a phone call. Boop, 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 boop. Bring.
Hello?
Hi, Joel. So after our interview, I felt really good about how you did, and I would love to have you come in for a code review.
Yes!
Okay, perfect. So I think with that, we are all set. I hope that this has been helpful, seeing how we do things here at ThoughtBot. And if you think that it's a better way to interview, you should try going through it yourself. You can apply by going to thoughtbot.com/jobs. And feel free to reach out to me or Joel. I don't have a big social media presence, but Joel's Twitter is on the screen. Yeah, thank you so much, y'all.